A shadow moves through the night, a man who looks ordinary but carries a secret more dangerous than any monster. His name is Dexter Morgan. To the world, he is calm, polite, almost invisible. But behind that mask lives something darker, something hungry, a need that cannot be controlled, only directed. This is not just a story of murder. This is the story of a man who became death itself, yet lived by rules of his own making. The question is not why Dexter kills. The question is, how could he ever stop? Dexter Morgan was never meant to be normal. His childhood was carved out of blood, trauma, and silence. As a boy, he witnessed horrors that no child should see, and those memories left a mark on him that could never fade. What grew inside him was not simply anger or pain, it was an urge, a hunger for killing. But unlike the random cruelty of the killers he would later hunt, Dexter's darkness had a strange order to it. His adoptive father, Harry Morgan, saw the truth early. Harry knew that his son was different, broken in a way the world would never forgive. But instead of letting Dexter fall into chaos, Harry gave him rules, a code, a path to survive. The code was simple but powerful. Kill only those who deserve it. Kill only those who kill others. Never get caught. Never let anyone see who you really are. These rules became Dexter's religion. While others prayed, Dexter planned. While others loved, Dexter pretended. He built a life as a blood spatter analyst for Miami Metro Police, a job that placed him in the perfect position to watch killers walk free and then decide their fate. He wore the mask of a friendly coworker, a brother, even a father. But under that mask, he was always the same, a predator who hunted predators. The city of Miami became his playground. And every alley, every crime scene, every courtroom whispered names that Dexter would add to his secret list. Each kill was not just an act of vengeance, it was a way for him to feed the hunger burning inside his chest. Wrapped in plastic, surrounded by photos of their victims, Dexter's prey would face him in silence before the knife came down. It was ritual. It was justice. But it was also survival. Because if Dexter did not kill, the darkness inside him would eat him alive. For years, he lived in this fragile balance, a man with two lives stitched together by lies and careful planning. To his colleagues, he was the quiet expert with a strange sense of humor. To his family, he was the dependable brother, the loving partner, the father who tried to give his son the kind of life he never had. But to the shadows, to the killers who thought themselves untouchable, he was something else entirely. He was the last face they would ever see. Still, no mask lasts forever. Dexter's secret life was always on the edge of collapse. Every smile, every dinner, every laugh with friends was built on the foundation of deception. The more he killed, the more tangled his life became. Rivals, lovers, enemies, and even his own sister came closer and closer to discovering what he really was. And yet, despite the risk, he could not stop. Because Dexter was not just living a double life. Dexter was the double life. Without the code, without the kills, there was no Dexter Morgan. There was only the shadow, the monster, the dark passenger he carried inside, and then came the moment when the world believed it was all over. A storm, a vanishing, a man who disappeared into the wind, leaving behind only whispers and unanswered questions. To many, Dexter was gone forever, swallowed by the chaos he had created. But darkness has a way of returning. Death, for someone like Dexter, is never the end. It is only the beginning of another chapter. And when he came back, he brought with him not just the hunger of the past, but a fury that made every new kill even more dangerous than before. When Dexter vanished, it felt final. The storm, the wreckage, the silence afterward, it was the perfect ending for a man who lived on borrowed time. To the people who knew him, or thought they did, he was simply gone. But for someone like Dexter, death was never the end. Death was a pause, an intermission before the next act of a play written in blood. His disappearance was not an escape from the darkness, but a new stage for it to grow stronger, quieter, and more dangerous than ever before. In exile. Far from the burning heat of Miami, Dexter built a new shell for himself. He crafted another mask, another false identity, another fragile attempt at pretending to be ordinary. He hid behind routine, work, and small talk, blending into a place where no one knew his name. But the truth about Dexter Morgan was never in his job or his smile. It was in the urge that never left him. It was in the itch under his skin, the whisper in the back of his mind, the dark passenger waiting to be unleashed. At first, he fought it. For years, Dexter tried to silence the voice. He convinced himself he could live without the code, without the ritual, without the cold knife flashing in the dark. But urges like his don't die. They wait. They crawl beneath the surface, clawing for release. And no matter how far he ran, Dexter could not escape what he truly was. He was not a man trying to leave behind a violent past. He was violence itself, walking around in human skin, pretending to belong. Resurrection was never about coming back to life. In a literal sense, it was about the inevitable return of the truth. When the mask of Dexter's new identity began to crack, the darkness rushed back in, sharper and hungrier than ever before. All it needed was the right trigger. And triggers were everywhere. A face that reminded him of past victims. A news story about another killer walking free. An injustice that screamed for punishment. Every detail was a spark. And eventually the fire inside him roared back to life. But this time, there was no Harry to guide him. No father's voice reminding him of the rules. No comforting code to keep him on the narrow line between order and chaos. Dexter was resurrected in a world without the one man who kept him tethered to reason. What returned was not the careful killer who planned every step, but a version of Dexter stripped raw, pushed by instinct more than strategy. His kills in this new chapter carried a sharper edge, a fury that showed how much he had lost and how much he still craved. The first kill after his return was not simply another entry in his long, secret history. It was a release, a confession, a reminder to himself that the man he tried to bury was not dead. With each strike, with each victim wrapped and silenced, Dexter's two lives collided again. The world of quiet routines and the world of shadows merged, and once more he stood at the center, balancing lies and blood. The resurrection was not just about him killing again, it was about him admitting to himself that he could never stop. Every time Dexter raised the knife in this new life, it carried more weight. The past lingered in every cut, every stare, every ritual. He wasn't only killing for the code. He was killing because the code was the only thing keeping him alive. Without it, he was lost. With it, he was still damned, but at least he had purpose. Resurrection brought him face to face with the truth that had always haunted him. Dexter Morgan was never truly gone. He was simply waiting to return, and when he did, the blood would flow again. But the world around him had changed. The people were different. The dangers were sharper. And the line between predator and prey was thinner than ever. In Resurrection, every kill became more than just another hunt. It was a test of whether Dexter could still control the darkness, or whether the darkness had finally learned to control him. Before Resurrection could ever begin, there was the legend. Dexter Morgan was not a man who killed once and disappeared into obscurity. He was a methodical force who left behind a trail of bodies hidden from the public eye, but etched into the silent history of the city. His life was measured not by birthdays or celebrations, but by the number of lives he ended. Each kill became a chapter in a secret book that only he could read. And together they formed a legacy more terrifying than any serial killer the world had ever known. In the early years, Dexter was still learning what it meant to live by Harry's code. His kills were careful but uncertain, like a student rehearsing the steps of a dance he had not yet mastered. He followed the rules, studied the target, confirmed the guilt, planned the disposal, but beneath the order there was still raw hunger. These first kills were not just about justice. They were experiments, ways for him to test how much blood he could spill while still walking through life unnoticed. And each success hardened him, shaping him into something more precise, more disciplined. As time passed, His table saw faces that reflected every kind of darkness the world could produce: murderers who preyed on children, predators who wore smiles in public, monsters hiding in plain sight. Dexter became both judge and executioner, carrying out punishments that the law failed to deliver. Every photo taped around his victims, every plastic sheet stretched across his kill rooms, carried the weight of lives already lost. His ritual was never random. It was a mirror forcing his victims to stare at the evidence of their sins before their final moment. The legacy of Dexter's kills was not only in the blood spilled, but in the way his methods evolved. In the beginning, he was content to hide in the shadows, a ghost who never left a trace. But as the years stretched on and the risks grew, Dexter adapted. He became sharper in his planning, faster in his executions, and colder in his detachment. The kills no longer belonged to an uncertain man struggling with an urge. They belonged to a craftsman, a master of death. Each victim disappeared into the darkness, leaving no clue behind except for the growing suspicion among those closest to him that something about Dexter was not quite right yet. No matter how carefully he worked, the legacy of his actions was not invisible. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation marked the moment when Dexter's secret life nearly collapsed. Dozens of bodies, sealed in plastic, discovered in the ocean's depths his private graveyard pulled into the daylight. The city trembled at the revelation that such a killer had walked among them. They whispered about the butcher, never realizing the man they feared sat quietly in their police department, sipping coffee and helping solve cases. For the public, it was a mystery. For Dexter, it was proof of just how close he lived to disaster every single day. But the legacy of his kills went beyond statistics and crime scenes. It haunted the people around him. Every relationship Dexter formed was infected by the blood he spilled. Lovers questioned the shadows in his eyes. Friends noticed his odd silences, his strange disappearances. And his sister, Deborah, carried the weight of discovering the truth, a burden that scarred her more deeply than any killer ever could. The bodies he left behind were not only victims of his blade, but casualties of his inability to escape who he truly was. Still, for Dexter, the legacy was not a burden, it was proof of control. Every kill was a reminder that he could channel his hunger into something structured, something that resembled justice. The world might never thank him, but in his own mind, he kept the scales balanced. For every innocent life spared, he claimed a guilty one. That was the rhythm of his existence. That was the story written in blood. And so, when resurrection came, it did not appear from nothing. It was born from this legacy, from the mountain of hidden corpses and the weight of secrets buried under years of lies. Resurrection was not the start of something new, it was the continuation of something inevitable. Because a man who had killed so many for so long could never truly stop. The past was not behind him. It lived in his hands, in his thoughts, in the unshakable habits carved into his soul. The legacy of every single kill was the foundation of his return. And in resurrection, those ghosts followed him into the present, demanding to be fed again. Dexter's return was not quiet. Resurrection meant that the dark passenger was fully awake again, and with it came a new series of kills that carried a different weight than before. These weren't simply repetitions of his old ritual, they were statements. Each one revealed something about the man he had become in his years away. And each one carried echoes of the legacy that had never left him. The first kill after his return was like opening a locked door that had been rattling for years. It wasn't chosen at random. The victim had earned their place on Dexter's table, guilty of violence and cruelty, a predator who thought they could keep feeding on others. But for Dexter, it was more than justice. That first kill was a release of pressure, the bursting of a dam. The plastic, the knife, the silence of the ritual, it was like breathing for the first time in years. Yet it also reminded him of what he had lost. There was no Harry to whisper in his ear. No one to remind him to stay calm, stay careful. This kill felt raw, uncontrolled, and more dangerous than any before it. As resurrection unfolded, each victim became part of a larger pattern. One was a hunter who preyed on animals for sport, finding pleasure in killing not for survival but for the thrill of domination. Dexter saw in him a reflection of what he could become if his code slipped completely, a creature who killed for fun rather than for order. Wrapping this man in plastic, Dexter wasn't just punishing him, he was punishing the possibility of himself. It was a warning carved into flesh. I will not become this. But the kill was rushed, almost desperate, as though Dexter was fighting to prove to himself that his return still had purpose. Another target was a man who had built his life around deceit, using trust as a weapon and betrayal as his currency. For Dexter, the hunt was not only about removing a predator from the world, but about confronting his own lies. He thought of the masks he wore every day, the way he deceived everyone who loved him, and in the face of this victim he saw the ugliest truth of all, that he and his prey were not so different. The plastic was a mirror. The knife was not just for justice, but for reflection. And when it was over, Dexter walked away not lighter, but heavier, burdened by the knowledge that each kill was drawing him closer to the very darkness he tried to control. Resurrection also gave us one of the most brutal kills in Dexter's history, a victim who was not just another shadow in the city, but someone who directly threatened to rip away the fragile life Dexter had built. This kill was not careful. It was not clinical. It was messy, emotional, and filled with a rage we had rarely seen from him before. The code blurred in this moment, and the line between necessity and desire collapsed. This was not the detached executioner of the past. This was a man cornered, fighting for survival, lashing out with a ferocity that revealed just how fragile his self-control truly was. It was the kind of kill that reminded us that Dexter was never fully in command of the dark passenger, it was always in command of him. Each kill in Resurrection told a story. They weren't just about removing the guilty. They were about exposing Dexter's state of mind. Where once he had been calm and meticulous, now he was reactive and volatile. Where once his table was a place of ritual control, now it felt like a battlefield where Dexter was fighting himself as much as his prey. Resurrection stripped away the illusion that he was a master of his urges. It showed that after everything he had lost, he was just another man desperately clinging to the rules that had kept him from becoming a complete monster. By the time the bodies began to pile up again, it was clear Dexter was not the same man who had once been known as the Bay Harbor Butcher. He was sharper in some ways, weaker in others, more violent, more reckless, yet still bound by the shadow of Harry's code, every victim he claimed in. Resurrection was a reminder that Dexter's story was never about whether he would kill. It was about what those kills revealed about the man underneath the mask. And in Resurrection, that mask was cracking with every drop of blood.